This is Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. We bring you stories of hope and encouragement.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Raul Lopez. And in front of us, Aquil Phillip, our distinguished guest. Welcome, brother.
Welcome. How you guys doing?
Aquil.
I'm glad to be here.
All right.
Good to have you.
Yeah.
Good to have you. We're going to start out and take us on a journey, but I want to first tell the audience that we're sitting with you as a brother of ours who shares a common thread. As you know, myself and Raul have all served time in the Florida Department of Corrections. You too have served close to 13 years
Yes.
In the Florida Department of Corrections. And we're going to get to that. But I want us to start out with Brooklyn, New York. Born and raised, or born at least. What was that like?
So originally, my family background, my mom and my dad is from Trinidad.
Okay.
They migrated over to Brooklyn, and when they had me, it was 1987. And my mom's blood is super thin. So she wanted to leave Brooklyn, and at that time, Brooklyn was really, really crime infested, really bad. So her and my dad, they never was officially married, but they split, and she moved down to Florida.
And you were how old at this age?
I was probably around 5, 6 years old.
And you moved to where in Florida?
So when we first moved in Florida, we moved to a place called Fort Pierce.
Okay.
And we lived there for about maybe a year or so. Then after that, we moved to Port St. Lucie.
How was life like growing up in Port St. Lucie, Florida?
So for me, it was kind of secluded because the area was kind of country and we just left the city. So it was totally different to what I was used to. And then I wasn't seeing my father like that, so I was missing him. And I was just, it wasn't likable, you know? It really wasn't likable in that area.
Any siblings growing up with you at that time?
Yeah, so I had an older brother. His name is Jamal. He's like 7 years my senior. We used to fight a lot, argue a lot, as brothers do, you know.
Sibling rivalry.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of good as far as my father not being there, so I kind of looked up to him, you know.
In the neighborhood that you were in, what were you into? Was you into sports? Were you into music? What was it that you gravitated to as a kid?
So when I was young, the first thing that got me, I grew up watching Bruce Lee movies. Oh man, I loved Bruce Lee. So I got into martial arts, and that was my thing. Karate, anything. And I really liked the Japanese culture, the Chinese culture. I used to try to eat with the chopsticks and all that. You know, I really was trying to just fit into that culture. So my brother would be like, man, you're not Chinese. I'd be like, man, leave it alone, man. I'm trying to be like Bruce, you know? So and that's what kind of pushed me into the realm to start liking the fight a lot, you know.
Okay.
And Aquil, we see that big smile, and you've been transformed by Jesus, but you close to 6'4", about my height. Yeah. So I appreciate the smile, but I see this guy could be dangerous.
In school, you got these guys who maybe, you know, they're the bullies, and then you got another group of guys that they may be chasing after this. What type of sect did you fall into as far as school? What type of people were you hanging out with, and what age were you when you remember hanging out and this fighting began?
Okay, so basically, I got to tell you this part. So when we was living there, one night my mother got a call on the phone, and when she got a call on the phone, she came into the room crying. Me and my brother, we had bunk beds. I slept on the top bunk. And she was crying profusely. And you know, when you see your mom cry, especially you that young, I just started crying. I didn't know even what was wrong. So she told me to get down. I got down off the bunk, and she said, man, your father has been shot and died in Brooklyn. And me and my brother, we just break down, all of us sobbing, crying, holding each other. And I remember right then and there, something inside of me broke. And when it broke, I felt hurt, I felt anger, I felt pain all at one time. So as a result of that, when I started going to school, anytime somebody would say something about my parents, my father, immediately I would fight. And when I tell my mom was about him, she would be mad at first, and then she would kind of like let me get away with it a little bit. And that's when, but she said, man, you do so good at school, but you always, like, I would always get in fights. So she'd be like, man, you got to stop fighting. You're too smart to be fighting and stuff like that, you know? So.
How old were you when he
Yeah,
passed away?
I was actually like 6 years old.
Okay.
So that's basically like when the fighting in school and all that's when it really started.
And that's very traumatizing. They say over 85, 86% of people who are incarcerated either didn't have a father or something happened that wasn't there. So that's something that we all share. I had a father, but he was never home. He was working a lot. And that just started it. Yeah. How did that progress?
So as I started like going to school and trying to process all the hurt and the pain and everything like that, and I kind of lashed out at everybody, like my mom and the people around me. And as I was going to school, the thing is, I was intelligent. So I was getting A and B honor roll, but I was getting in school suspension, IS, running away from teachers, talking back to the teachers, different things like that. And it just was a whole downward spiral of me just not having guidance, not having that father, not having nobody really to guide me in the right path. And my mindset was like, I'm going to do what I want. I lost my father. I really don't care no more. I listen to my mom sometimes, but not really,
You mentioned your older brother. Did he try to corral you, try to get you to put you back on the right path or talk to you? Or did you have any voices that you can remember, whether at school or anywhere, that were like, hey, you need to stop doing this?
So at the time, my older brother, he was kind of in the same rut as me. He was going to school in the higher, but he wasn't fighting as much, but he was just, in his mind frame, he started leaning toward the drugs, And at that time, I had a godmother and an aunt. So I remember like the first time that I even heard about God or anything like that, really, I had an aunt who used to live in Rochester, New York. So I would go to her sometimes, summer times or sometimes in the wintertime for Christmas. And when I would go up there, she would always be talking about Jesus and God, and she didn't let her kids watch anything except that. And I used to be like, man, this is so weird. How come we can't watch regular TV and stuff? And then, so over the course of that, I started hearing the gospel, and I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds all right. I didn't disbelieve it, but I was just like, okay, that's kind of over there. I'm over here, So that's kind of like how the process played out as far as people that I had there. My godmother, she was, at the time, she was always talking about God too. And she lived in Staten Island, New York. So sometimes I see her or talk to her on the phone. She'd be encouraging me a little bit. But I was too young to really comprehend or understand the whole concept of God and him loving me and everything like that.
It's interesting how God will put certain people in your life and maybe plant a seed that we don't even pay attention. But years later, that comes back. Because we will get into how the Lord touched you and what happened. But we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. The point is that he started before we were even aware of him.
Definitely does. And that's one thing I can say he always does. He always sends messengers and words to you, and we got to take heed, even at a young age, something that could pierce our heart and really touch us,
Anybody in your neighborhood, you got certain elements, no matter what neighborhood you live in. You got the dope boys or the drug dealers, and you got gangs over here, and you got these people that or the kids that may be experiencing or experimenting with drugs. Did anybody try to bring that into your life during this time of adolescence?
Yeah. Oh, so now we're gonna go up a little bit. So from after that, we end up moving from Port St. Lucie in that Fort Pierce type of area. We moved to Broward County. So now when we get to Broward County, I'm probably like around the age maybe like 7, 6, right? No, I'm sorry, 7 or 8. And when we get there, my mother, it was one point in time where she was struggling real bad. So we had to move to kind of like hood areas in Broward, Pompano.
You're talking struggling financially.
Yeah, struggling financially. So we had to move to, areas that's like more hood, more urban. And when I got in those areas, of course, there was everything around. There was gangs, there was drugs, there was, prostitution, all that. And I seen it. And the way that my mom raised me, she always raised me to like be kind of like a homebody, to come to her always and stuff like that. So when we moved to that area, I started seeing a lot of different things, and I'm like, I was curious, but I was still kind of scared too. Like, I was scared of my mom, like, yo, I don't want to get a whooping, I don't want that belt, but I'm seeing all these different things, and now my curiosity kind of peaked, So after that, I started liking football. So when I started liking football, my brother used to throw football with me. I started catching. I was always a fast runner. Like when they had field day in school, I'd always be able to run fast. And that's when I realized, like, okay, I could play this football thing good. I was playing like wide receiver and running back, and I got real good at playing football. So I was like, man, this is something I could see myself doing. And that was kind of my dream back then, to like play football, you know?
For the NFL.
Yeah, for the NFL. I definitely wanted to try to make it to the big leagues and you know, everything like that.
I was curious to know, because as you're coming along, what was it that you got involved in? Because eventually you're doing, you did almost 13 years, but what happened along the way? Like when I was younger, you know, I'd be doing drugs or...
During middle school, I was getting good grades, but fighting, getting suspended. And by the time I was going to transition from middle school to high school, I found out about basketball. I started playing basketball heavy, but by that time, my brother and his baby mother, he had a stripper girlfriend at that time, and she was working in the club. So she started bringing liquor bottles home. And me, I started getting exposed to liquor. I started drinking a little bit, but I wasn't a heavy drinker. So my brother was like, man, you know, you could start selling these liquor bottles. And that's what I started doing. So on my way to transition to high school, I became like the liquor man at school. And I was selling bottles of Moet, Alizé, Hypnotic in high school. I would sneak it in my book bag and go to certain spots. I go to the Trinity spot, different island spots, and I know they like to drink, and I sell them the liquor. So that was like my first introduction to kind of like hustling or, you know, drug dealer. I tried to sell dope one time. It didn't really work for me. And I seen my brother, my older brother, by that time, he had turned to like selling weed. I tried to do that. That didn't really work for me. And at this time, I'm still intelligent, so I'm still getting good grades in school. But now my mind and my focus is like, okay, now I want girls and stuff. So now I'm messing with girls. And then I started gambling. So now I'm playing basketball for money. I'm shooting dice. And now I'm starting to get sucked into the world. But in this course of time when this happened, my mother ended up getting saved. So when my mother gets saved, she stops drinking. And she starts praying and reading the Bible, and she starts telling me about God. I'm like, hey, she sound like my aunt when I used to go, you know, to Rochester.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, she changed. I'm like, man, but I see what she do. She just go home, go to church, go to work, come home. And I'm like, man, I don't want no life like that. That's boring. She just doing 3 things. That's not for me. You know what I mean? So it deterred me from, I heard what she was saying. I know it was real, but I was like, man, that's not for me right now. I don't want that. Right? So along the course of that, when I started gambling and doing all that, it came to a point, you know, and the Bible says the flesh is never satisfied. So I kept going deep. I was like, man, this is not enough. And then the music I was listening to music about murder. I was listening to music about drugs, about getting money. And then I started to feel, you know, like I was lacking. I started to feel like, yo, my mother used to make me think that $20 was a lot of money. And I used to be like, what? I don't have any money, this and that. So I'm like, now my mind became money focused. And I was like, man, okay, I got to get money however I can. I tried to work at a job at Target for like a week. I quit that. I worked at Papa John's for a summer, 2-3 months. I quit that while I was selling the liquor. And I was like, man, this is not working. So now I end up going to the streets. And basically when I got to the streets, now I had friends that had guns. I started playing with guns. We started doing, you know, stealing out of places. And then after that, it got to the point where we wanted to start to do robberies.
And how old were you at this point where it escalated to the robberies?
So around that point, I was probably about, when it started, probably around 16, 17.
It's interesting to see how things progress. From selling liquor bottles, now you're carrying guns. Were you involved in any armed robberies or?
So I remember this one time, and actually like what happened to me, well, even before I say that, I want to say this. My mother one time was coming home from church, and she had forced me to go, and it was like African Day, so she had on all the African garments and stuff. She made me wear like a little African thing. I went, and when we was driving, we was in a turning lane to go left. And the turning lane, you know, the green arrow turned on, and then a car crashed into the back of us. When it crashed into the back of us, like we kind of jerked and we got out the car. And my mom went to the back. She was like, oh, thank you, Lord, thank you, Lord. At this time, I'm like, yo, why is she going crazy like that? So I got out the car, I went to the back of the car, and in the back of my mom's car, she had a 626 Mazda. They're not that firm. And her car only had scratches on it, and the other car looked like it ran into a crash dummy wall. And it was like this, and it was a Zuzu. It was a SUV. So my mom was like, man, do you see how God was protecting us? This is what I'm always telling you about God. God sent his angels, and he was protecting us. And when I seen that, that touched me deeply, and I was like, man, God is definitely real. And I'm like,
The Mazda was supposed to be crushed, not the SUV.
The type of cars that it was, the Mazda was supposed to be crushed in the back, and they were supposed to have probably like a little dent, but our car was supposed to be crushed in. So when I seen that, I was like, man, God is real. It's true what my mom was saying. And at that moment, it captivated me. But then as soon as I went back to school and went back to what I was doing with my friends, all of that like left my mind, you know? And so particularly one night on a robbery that we went on, I remember we seen some dudes, they just got off of work, they was together, we seen them hanging out, it was a Friday night, and they was like, yo, what's up, you wanna get him? So I was like, yeah, we went back to the house, we got the gun, and when we got the gun, we were on our way there, we got to the destination, we hopped out. Now, this is around 2006. So around then, the dress code was long, super long shirts they call tall tees and stuff like that. And I had a shotgun, so I put half of the shotgun like under the tall tee, and we was creeping toward where the people were at. But then I still had a conscience and a heart, right? Because of everything that my mom was telling me. So it was kind of like I was battling within. And I seen this lady open the door, like right in front of the area where we were gonna rob the people. And the lady opened the door, and a little girl came out right next to her. And as soon as I seen that, I was like, no, we can't, not right here. So we left, we went back in the car, and our conscience saved that situation from happening, right? And there was another dude that we tried to rob that night, and he actually got away. He ran into a parking lot, and he got away from us. And that guy, we had guns, bats. We was gonna just totally just try to beat him and crush him. Because at that time and at that point, I was even angrier because when I was living in the streets, basically, it was a point probably around 11th grade where I'm about to tell you, I like basketball. So it was a group that came out called And1. They used to do all these basketball tricks. And I had the DVDs. And I let a friend hold the DVD. And when I let him hold the DVD, he gave it back to my best friend, but my best friend lied to me and told me he didn't give it back. So I went and kind of asked the dude about it. I was pressing him like, yo, where's the DVD? He was like, yo, I gave it back. So I called my best friend. He told me he was lying. And at the time, the guy used to work at the Boston market. So it was one night, I got on a bike, and I called my friend. He used to work at a Checkers down the street from me. So I'm like, man, this guy, he's playing. He trying to butt me for the DVD. So I said, like, yo, I'm gonna go handle that. He's like, no, man, just go fight him like you normally do. Why you wanna shoot him or stab him? No, man, don't do that. He was like discouraging me from doing that. Yeah. So I was like, man, whatever. So I hung up with him, and then he called me back like 10 minutes later. He's like, yo, come where I'm at, hurry up. Now this is the same night I was gonna go, and at the time I didn't have my gun with me. I had my knife. I let my friend hold my gun. So I like, man, I'm gonna just go stab him. So my friend called me, like I said, 10 minutes later. He was real urgent. He like, come. I was like, what's up? What's going on? He's like, yo, come down the block. So I got on my bicycle. I'm riding down the block. And before I could get to the Checkers, the plaza where he's at, a police come, and the police pulled me over. And at the time I had a knife and I had brass knuckles in my pocket. So when they pulled me over, he did the search. He found the brass knuckles. He was like, this is a weapon, but I didn't have my ID or anything on me. And then he found a knife, but he said if the blade was not longer than my physical hand, then that wasn't considered a weapon. So because I didn't have my ID, they took me down to like a little substation. Now, mind you, by the time I was riding my bike, it was like 8 o'clock. Boston Market closed at 11 o'clock. So I sit in the substation for about 3 hours. And then he confirmed my identity. He's like, all right, fine, you can go, but you're going to have to show up in a court date because it's brass knuckles, right?
How old were you then?
At that time, I was probably like 17.
Okay.
So when that happened, my mind was still on stabbing the dude. I left there. I asked the guy for my knife. He gave me my bike back. I got on my bike, rode, hid my bike by the garbage, whipped out the knife, and was hiding in the bushes waiting for the guy to come out of Boston Market to try to stab him.
And that's crazy, stabbing someone for DVDs. Now that we think about it, yeah.
Yes.
That's how the devil tricks us into.
Mm-hmm. So thank God that the guy had already left. Because by the time, when he let me go at 11, by the time I got there, it was like 11, probably 05, 10. Took me like 5 minutes to ride there. And then I waited about 10 minutes in the bushes, and I went in the front. I seen there was only 2 girls, and I was like, okay, I missed them. I went back rode the bike back to my friend who worked at Checkers. He was like, man, you crazy. You was going to stab the dude just because of DVD. Then the next day, my best friend called me on the phone in the morning, was like, oh, man, I'm sorry, man. I got your DVD, man. I just ain't want to tell you, but, man, I'm going to give you the money for it. Don't worry about it. Da-da-da. So in hindsight, if that would have happened, I would have stabbed an innocent guy over nothing.
Over nothing.
You know?
Incredible.
That's what my mindset was at. That's how tormented I was, you know?
And God intervened.
Yes.
God intervened in that situation. It's like we think about the random occurrences. Did you, at that point, was there anything that said, whether it was through your mom? I know you were saying you were watching her, the lifestyle was boring. I don't want to live that life. But I hear when you say you're about to do something and there's a little girl, that conscience says, I can't do this right now. And so there are things that God softens our heart in certain moments to stop us from doing certain things. We think that it's just us, but it's really God.
Yeah.
Were there ever any point where you were looking to back away from that lifestyle after that happened, or you were just like, no, that was just one incident, it was an occurrence, and other things happened, obviously, that led you to the 13 years?
In fact, after all that happened, I actually went worse, because now I was more angry, I was more distraught, and I was like, man, me and my mom actually had a falling out. So when we had a falling out, something my brother did, and I ain't want to say nothing. And she blamed me for it, and she hit me in the head with a broomstick. And when she hit me in the head with a broomstick, I got mad, and I went out the door, and I just slammed the door, and I was like, oh. I was like, you know what? I'm done with her. I called myself being done with her, right? And I closed the door. I left. I called my brother. I was venting to my brother. He was like, man, just chill. Go walk around the block or something. Da, da, da. And after that, I was like, man, you know what? I'm not living here no more. I'm 17. I'm old enough. I thought knew everything about the world and everything was going on. And so I ended up going back, and probably like a week later, it was a Friday night, and my mom tried to take me to this church, a church called Redeeming Word. And when she tried to take me there, I was already angry. I'm like, I'm not going. So she tried to take me there, and I started, as I got in the car, we was driving, I started beating, like I felt this rage come over me. I started beating the seats, and I started crying. And as I started crying, my mom is driving, and she kind of looked back, she never seen that happen before. So she started praying. And when she prayed, my whole body, it locked up, and I couldn't beat the seats anymore, and I really couldn't move. And I just felt like it was like I was on fire. And I couldn't even really cry or nothing no more. And my whole body was just still. And we got to the church. And when we got to the church, my mom got out the car. I got out the car. Then I let her get in front of me. And as soon as she got in front of me, I ran. I couldn't go in the church. I ran from where the church was at, and I ran around the block to a 7-Eleven. And I stayed there the whole time till I figured she was getting out, and I ran back by her car. And she probably didn't even know I didn't go in the church, because she was so mad. She was just walking. And that's when I know right there, I was like, oh man, something got a hold of me. Like, this is not it's not me. It's something that's more powerful than me that I'm allowing. And I didn't know at the time, but at the time I was bound. I was really bound up by the enemy. And I couldn't even go in a church or around a church setting at that time. So at that time, that's when my mind switched from wanting to do robberies to now I want to murder, I want to kill. I'm listening to that type of music. I got those type of influences, and now spiritually, that's where I was at, right? So now we're going to, this is a different night. We're going to a robbery, and we see a guy in the back of his car. He's talking on the phone, so we see him. We hop out. And before we hop out, though, when I was driving around the car, I said, man, if somebody act crazy, I'm going to kill him. So I spoke that out of my mouth, not knowing the power of my words, and I said that, right? So we get to where the guy's at. They're like, what's up? So I see him. I'm like, come on, let's get him. So when we get there, we back the car in. I get out a hat. I have the shotgun. I go up to the guy, and I was like, give it up. And the guy automatically start panicking. So I had some guys with me. They go in there trying to search his pocket. And as he's panicking, I'm getting closer with the gun. Because in my mind, I'm like, man, he's already doing too much. I'm going to kill him. So I had that in my mind, and I got closer to him with the gun. And it's a parking lot, so it has the parking ledges, but there's no cars, particularly where we at beside our car. And he lets out this scream. To this day, I never heard nobody scream like that. It was like the Reaper, the spirit of death, it was all there, because the scream that he let out, it was like the scream of death. And then when he did that, he tried to jump and lunge and grab the barrel of the shotgun. And I went back, and when I went back over the ledge, the gun went off, he fell down, the two people with me began to run. And I grabbed the gun like this, and I'm turning to run this way. But as I'm turning to run this way, I still got my head looking back, and I see the guy that we're attending to rob, he getting up. And I'm like, how are they getting up? So I turn around, and I run to go to the car and throw the gun, and they're like, nah, Aquil, you shot C.
Did you shoot the guy that you were going to rob? Did he get hit?
So this is what happened. Anytime you're doing evil, it always backfire. It always backfire. We might have one plan in our head that says it's the way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof is death. So the guy who we was robbing got back up, and when I threw the gun in the car, they say, you shot C. Now, C is one of the guys that's helping me rob the guy. So C drop in the road. I'm like, oh. So we all go out to the road. We pick C up. I got him he has a hole in his chest like this. So I got C. I'm in the back seat. I'm like, C, hold on. They started driving, but they driving crazy, like about to crash, because the two dudes with me, they younger than me, they crying. So now I'm telling C to hold on, and I see him, he's just like, and then I heard him breathe his last breath, and I felt when his spirit left his body, he went limp in my arms. When he went limp in my arms, my mind went into shock. And as soon as my mind went into shock, I started to see every time that survived, like the car accident, I started to see every time everybody talked to me about God, everything flashed before my eyes. Like my whole life just started flashing before my eyes when he died in my arms, right in the back of the car. So we made it to the hospital, and I'm still in shock. But by the time we made it there, he was already DOA. He was gone. They brought a stretcher, and when they brought out the stretcher, we put him on a stretcher. They took him to the hospital. You know, they tried to revive him. It didn't work. So it was a police there at the hospital. So the police at the hospital came and asked us what happened. And one of us, we just made up a story that we got robbed, and C tried to buck the robbery, and they shot him. That's a story that we made. And then, so I went back. At that time, I was living at my friend's house. One of my friends that was with me, I was living at his house for about 3 months, because remember I told you I stopped talking to my mom, and I was really out in the streets. Like, I was surviving off of robberies. That's how I was getting money, right? So when that happened, now I'm in shock, because I'm like, we went on a robbery to do a robbery, and I ended up taking life, but not the life I wanted to take. I ended up taking the life of one of my friends.
And we want to stop right there, because there is so much more to your story, your testimony. Something miraculous happened. So you guys got to watch the next episode. You've been hearing a testimony of our brother, Aquil Phillip. I'm Johnny Branham, Raul Lopez. This has been the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. Now, this is the Death or Prison podcast, but we say choose life.
Maybe we can change the world.